Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Dead Boy Detectives, Season 1, Episode 7. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we had the opening where we have the meetup between Esther and the Cat King. It's like, yeah, we got some stuff to talk about. And I love just like the back and forth. Because I was curious. I brought up like, okay, obviously the Cat King was pissed at Edwin last episode. But him getting dragged back to hell was kind of like, nah. Because I thrown out there like maybe he had something to do with that, but I figured he didn't, but I still threw it out there as a possibility. He's actually upset to know that Edwin went to hell, but he's also like, right, Edwin's so great and smart. He got out of hell before. He'll get out of hell again. And he's just like, oh, look at me. He's like, oh, I'm just so romantic, because he's like, this is going to be like our little rendezvous. We're going to meet up afterwards. It's all going to be good. It's like, right, I was pissed at him, but then he got dragged to hell, but it's like, he'll be back, and I know he'll find his way out. Esther's obviously all about trying to get revenge about the boys. She's pissed at the Cat King for ratting out Monty and everything. So it's like, right, your plan didn't fail. You were never going to be able to like beat the boys and their friend. Like, I don't know why you thought that was going to happen. But sadly, the Cat King gave her the inspiration for her idea, because she's like, wait, normally you torture a ghost, eventually they dissipate. They can't handle it. It just makes them disappear. But she's like, if someone like Edwin, who survived hell for 70 years, means he's kind of tough. So what you can do is you can feed off that energy, basically use him as kind of like a hamster wheel to a lot. Because it's like, right, what are ghosts at the end of the day? They're nothing but energy and power. So she's going to, because I was wondering, was like, is that supposed to be a substitute for her like staying young? But it's like, no, it's just meant to give her power. And she says later on when she's talking to Mick about like, I want to run this town and they're going to worship me like they should have. Which I'm like, I wonder, is Esther supposed to be someone like, you know, from like a mythological thing? Like maybe Esther isn't her OG name. Maybe that's just her latest name. But maybe she's someone from like Greek or Norse mythology. Like maybe she's from some form of mythology of, you know, especially like her connection to Lilith. You know, maybe there's like some biblical like lore behind who Esther really is type of thing. Because her to say like, I should be worshipped as a god. Because like that's her. I didn't even think about that until she brought it up to Mick of like, yeah, we've both kind of been screwed over. It's like, I mean, to be fair, like Lilith isn't a god, but she's on that celestial plane, not on the god level, but she's on that celestial level that it's like, okay, I could, you know, once again, mother of demons and stuff like that. Is it just demons? I know, like, in Lucifer, they made her, like, just a mother of demons, but, like, she's a mother of monsters, isn't she? Or is that technically Pandora, because Pandora opened, you know, literal Pandora's box? But I think, like, Lilith is, she's a mother of demons, but I think some stuff just makes her the mother of monsters, isn't she? Whatever the case may be. There's something there besides just being tricked and the whole like, oh, I thought I was going to be a god. Because it isn't just the whole, oh, I'm hung up on the fact is I'm going to like live forever, but I'm going to age and get decrepit. But it's like, she feels like she was really like screwed out of something, out of being a god. I don't know why she feels like, and they should worship me. So I'm wondering, is it more of a thing of like, who was she that she felt like she needed to be worshipped but wasn't worshipped, you know? I wonder if we're going to find out if she's like Eve. Obviously, it's a very different version of the character. If it ends up being Eve, it's going to obviously be a very different version than the version we got in the TV show, in the Lucifer TV show. But I would like, that's the only thing, like, especially because considering, like, if you look back on that scene, once again, that crystal saw of like Lilith making that deal and making her like immortal, it's like that looked like some biblical time type of stuff. So that's why I'm like, not unless she ends up being Eve or something, but I don't know. We'll have to wait to see how that plays out. But it just feels like we are bubbling beneath the surface on something of what, like Esther being someone of significance. I also wasn't expecting her to crawl out of the ground as quickly as she did. They're like, oh, she'll be out of the picture for a while. I thought at the bare minimum, maybe episode 8, the season finale. At most, like, at the end of the season finale, it's like, oh, she crawls out of the ground or something, or pops back. Wasn't expecting her to pop up literally beginning of the next episode. That was wild. That's wild. But you also had the whole situation of, I thought she was going to like try and convince Mick to help her get the ingredients she needed to make her device. But she kind of threatened him later on. But I thought like, oh, you want to be a walrus again? If you help me get my powers as a god, I can run things and I can send some of that power your way, making you a human again. I thought but the fact is, Esther's all about her. She's not looking out for anyone else, so that wasn't even on the table. I thought that scene was setting it up to be a thing of Mick is going to help her out of like, hey, like my selfish need to, I've spent 50 years as a human, I want to be back as a walrus. This might be my only means. I thought that's what they were setting up, but nope, it never ended up happening that way. So, he was just threatened because he was still kind of like, nah, I'm not going to be about you doing all this, hurting those ghost kids or that girl. Like, nah, I'm not going to be a part of all that. So, but either way, it's also interesting, some other developments. We found out that the Cat King, apparently magic doesn't work on him, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. So Esther just proceeded to like beat him to death. But it's like, right, the moment he was like, quote unquote, dead, I was like, yeah, 9 lives, right? And it's like, yeah, he's on his 3rd life, which I'm like, okay. Well, he's like, that was my 3rd life. But I'm like, interesting. So how old are you? Like, for you to only be on your 3rd life? And he said himself, it's like, I only get 9, so I wonder what happens when you die. Does a new Cat King step up and kind of, like, it resets, like, hey, here's the next Cat King, you get the 9 lives thing, like, or when you die, is it like there is no more Cat King ever? I wonder how that whole thing works. But once again, who knows how old he is, but for him to only have been on his 3rd life, that's still impressive. To be fair, it's like, you only got 9 of them, so you better hope those mother effers stretch, so... Either way, so there's that whole situation. Then we cut back to where that last episode ended off with, obviously, Edwin just got dragged to hell, and the night nurse knows nothing about it. She's like, I didn't summon that thing. Like, an alarm must have went off the moment I put, like, his name into, like, something. So it's like he most likely got dragged to the mid-tier levels of hell, which is interesting because she says later on, like, even Lucifer's only at the bottom, which makes sense because this whole thing revolves around the 9 circle of hell. Because it's like, right, because I brought that up maybe even last episode. I was like, interesting, because we've only seen one section of hell because of, like with everything with Lucifer in the Sandman. So we've only seen one section of hell, and there's like this episode, covers at least half. Because it's like, right, he's in the midsection, which I was like, if he was in the midsection, I wonder what floor would that put him on. Because it seemed like that was him on the 4th floor, but maybe that's kind of some like in between space he ended up being. Because the floors are limbo, lust, gluttony, and then the 4th one would be greed, isn't it? I came up with a story a couple years ago that kind of uses the 9 circle of hell as a framing device, so I became familiar with them through that means. But I'm like, I don't know, because that doesn't necessarily, I guess, I don't know if that would technically count as a 4th floor, because we never came across anything that, not unless some of those other floors are kind of a combo, like, but like gluttony seemed like gluttony, but I'm like, we didn't necessarily see a greed. 5 and 8 are the ones I never remember. No, it's 6 and 8 are the ones I always have a tough time remembering. Because wasn't one of those, I think it might be 8, might be the heretics or whatever, false prophets or something like that. Maybe 6 is heretics. I know 5 is, I think, wrath. 7 is murderers and violence, and then 9's like the final layer of hell. Either way, tinges and all that aside. But yeah, we only got like some of those. I'm going on this tangent, but like before we get to those story points, I want to circle back. But Charles has decided that he's going to make a trip to hell, and he doesn't want Crystal to go along. And I love that the way they frame it, where it's like, she's like, hey, I'm going to go too. And then Charles just looks at her and goes, no. Which I think is very poetic, considering like Charles has always been very like yes when it comes to Crystal, and Edwin's usually been the one that's no when it comes to Crystal. And for her, it's like, this is bullshit. Edwin's my friend, whether he wants to be or not. I'm not going to take the chance that, like, right, I want to be able to help get him back from hell. I also don't want to take the chance you might get lost in there trying to get him back. But for Charles, it's like, I'm not going to take that chance, like, because we also don't know what, like, yes, she's found out about these new possibilities with her powers. we actually don't know what her power situation would be like in hell. That might get a little wonky in a different plane of existence like hell. Like, who knows how that would fare. So it is a thing of, you got to probably keep a very like tight team going into hell. You probably less people, less chances of getting caught and there being issues maybe. But so Charles is the only one taking the pathway to hell. The night nurse is reluctant to kind of help him, but Charles is like, right, you want to know if when I save Edwin, we will go with you to the lost and found. When she's like, how can I trust you? And she looks inside of his memories, and we see the day that Charles and Edwin met. It's actually really sad. It was like when he managed to get away from the boys. He hid in an attic to like stay away from them, but he's dying of hypothermia. And I was like, oh, he's seeing Charles. I was like, is he already dead? And I mean, when Charles was already seeing Edwin, so I was like, oh, is he already like dead? And Edwin's just trying to ease him into it. That's what I thought. It's more like, no, Edwin knew he was that Charles was in a process of dying and didn't want to let him know like what this meant. Because the difference is like Nico like was on the death's doorstep and then came back and was fine. To be fair, Charles' circumstances is like, right, he was already in that tipping point that, especially in like 1989 or whatever, like there probably wasn't anything medically they could do. Like he'd probably already crossed the point of hypothermia that there was nothing anyone would have been able to do at the time to save him. So Edwin just wanted to be there for him, despite not being sociable at all. Despite not being very sociable and not liking people, he still chose, and that speaks volumes about Edwin, him as his character. And the fact is that he was there to comfort someone he knew was dying. And even at the end of the day, Charles appreciated it. It's like, thanks for not letting me know. Because it's like, yeah, because there wasn't really much anyone could do but comforting him and reading to him and explaining the whole thing about being dead, which Charles also brought up some questions I had at the very beginning of the series. Because my thing is, right, how are ghosts not constantly falling through the floor? I figured I was like, well, they probably are. The whole thing is you have to get your bearings on being a ghost, so eventually you have to realize, like, okay, I gotta focus on not falling through the floor. You just have to make it seamless, and it has to become second nature, like breathing. That's what I thought, but which is kind of what Edwin says. He's like, right, there are ghost rules. Basically, I don't want to fall through the floor, so I don't. That's kind of as much of an explanation as you get. But because as Charles talked about it, and Edwin talked about it too, it's like, right, you can touch anything, you just won't be able to feel it, as we've seen them kind of showcase time and time again. But makes you wonder what those other ghost rules are. But despite Edwin being like, hey, you're here, Charles, you're dead, but stay here, death will show up, the blue light, you follow her, go to your afterlife, I'm a bounce. But for Charles, it's like, nah, man, like, I kind of had me, like, I forgot the exact wording. It's just kind of like, right, like, death kind of came too quickly, like, I wasn't ready, so it's just like, what else am I going to do? So he decided to go with Edwin, because it's like, right, I'm not really good with people, but it speaks volumes that Edwin was kind of willing to be open enough to let Charles tag along, and Charles is kind of like, obviously this isn't too, like, who knows how long. He probably might have been out of hell maybe a year or two, because he seemed well adjusted, but it's still like a fresh enough wound of his escape from hell at that point in time by the time Edwin met Charles. So, but it was kind of sweet seeing the night nurse see this memory, and she's like, right, you were willing to give up your afterlife. It could have been like a perfect ending for you, and you gave it all up for your friend. And he's like, yeah, that's why I'm doing this. Like, I'm willing to go to hell to save him too. So, because he owes, in his mind, I think it's a thing of, I owe Edwin. Like, it's like, the fact is that you were there for me at my end. You were there, you were nice to me, you comforted me, especially considering his home life. What he was dealing with at school is another thing, but also his home life, he probably never felt safe and okay. And I think that's what they gave each other. Like, Edwin and Charles both gave each other safety, comfort, and a real home in a lot of ways. Because we haven't really talked about Edwin's parents at all. That hasn't really been a conversation that ever came up of like, well, what were your parents like? I mean, maybe that was something early on, but I feel like I don't remember that being talked about. We just, know him being ritually sacrificed at the boarding school. That's about it. So like I said, we have Crystal off trying to find David because she's thinking like, well, he's the only demon I know, and the demon would be my easiest way to get to hell. And because she was going off to meet her ex, Jenny, who tries not to cares the most, follows suit. It's like, wait, you're about to meet your crazy abusive boyfriend? Oh crap, here we go. And she makes sure to take a cleaver. And Charles makes his way into hell while Nico stays behind to keep an eye on the night nurse, who's just complaining the entire time about like the paperwork she's going to have to do and all the filing she's going to have to do in the aftermath of all of this. But it's just like, fine, despite not being human, like a little bit of that humanity creeped in. She's like, fine, I'll help you kids out. So I love that. Who's the first person Charles runs across when he's going through the stairs of hell? Lo and behold, it's Maxine, which I think it's funny because Charles is literally the only person that never met Maxine. I mean, technically, Crystal didn't meet Maxine. She saw her dead body at the end of episode 5, but still. But the one person who, because he's like, oh, she's like, why? And she's like, why am I here? Why am I here? I was like, oh, that's hilarious. I'd almost thought it'd be, well, I was about to say, like, we know at least 2 other people we got 3 characters that got dragged to hell. Brad, Hunter, and the husband from the Devlin house. We know they all got dragged to hell. But to be fair, they're probably in the deeper parts of hell. Like, I mean, if anything, like, if not at the pits of hell, like the final layer, at least the Devlin house situation, that father would be at least in like I said, the 7th layer, potentially. Like I said, that's where like murderers and violent people, it's like murder and violence is like, that's there. So I don't know if Brad and Hunter would necessarily be there. So either way, I also love that we just see her at the end of the episode too, when she's just like sitting on those stairs too, just for like twiddling her thumbs. I'm like, that she's just trapped there. I'm like, why aren't you? I guess where else would you? I mean, there's other layers that you would like could drag you to. So I'm like, why are you just on the stairs and not knowing? Like, I don't know. I'm curious if that's just her kind of waiting her time until she's actually told where to go. It's really hard. We don't really understand the full context of how things operate in hell. But anyway, like I said, Charles is making his way through the different layers. Like I said, the first one was Limbo. It's so interesting because a lot of that stuff gave me the Evil Within vibes. Some of it gave me mainly like Evil Within 2, especially like the first layer, especially like that hotel kind of lobby. Kind of definitely gave me like the Evil Within 2 vibes, but some of the other areas gave me Evil Within 1, especially where Edwin was. Definitely gave me gave me vibes of like the hospital from the first game. There's also, because of like the doll element of it, it also gives you like Evil Within 2. Also gives you Resident Evil 8 vibes as well too. If you know, you know. So that was just interesting, but like it definitely leaned into like the whole Evil Within aesthetic in a lot of ways, which I thought was so like, this is probably like the creepiest, like spookiest thing we've come across released so far in the show, like in like just aesthetically, especially atmospherically and stuff like that. I thought it was so interesting that the layers were so empty, but I love the lines later on of like at the end of the episode where Charles is like, wait, none of this was here, and Edwin's like, yeah, you don't see what is here. This was all here before when Charles passed through initially. He just can't see it because until you've experienced hell, you can't see what's in these rooms, really. It's like, because experiencing hell basically rewires your brain to finally like see everything for what it really is. I guess that's supposed to be the cruel reality of it, of like, yeah, because your brain isn't adjusted to it, you haven't seen hell, but the moment you've seen the hell, you've gotten adjusted to it, then you start seeing all the other pockets of hell. It's like, that's such an interesting concept. But while Charles is making his way through, we catch up to Edwin. He's bloodied up and kind of a mess. I'm like, what is that situation? Was not expecting him to run into Simon, who is he's the main one in charge that led to Edwin's sacrifice and death, which Simon said at the time, like, right, he didn't mean to it, he thought it was just a prank. But it's really sad because like Edwin wants to like rip into him, like, you deserve to be here, like you're the reason why like I went through what I went through. It's like, you've been here nearly a century. Obviously time plays differently in hell. It's meant to like mess with your head, and like you're not gonna realize how long you've been there. But he's like tearing out pages of a book, and it's like once he tears out all those pages, he'll be able to go. But the book recycles itself, and so Edwin wants to tear into him because it's like this is what you deserve. But then there's the mirror situation, goes through it, and he sees someone. And the moment he did that and saw someone, I was like, wait, what? I was like, isn't that? And she introduces herself later. I was like, yeah, I thought so. I was looking and I was like, isn't that supposed to be one of Dream's siblings? I couldn't remember her name until she introduced herself. But she was like, Despair. I was like, yeah. Because I was like, even like the little hook on her finger, like little ring hook, I was like, that seemed familiar too. I can't remember their other sibling because it's one of the other, because we only like outside of, it's the sibling that's played by, is it Mason Park Alexander or is it Mason Alexander Park, who plays one of Dreams and Depth's like sibling, the one that's kind of had their machinations like playing out in season 1 of The Sandman. So because I think Despair only popped up like once or twice at best. But especially because Despair had this line of, oh yeah, like the possibilities are like endless or something like that. I was like, wait, isn't that what you guys are called? The Endless? Because I think I try to remember their name a different episode and I was like, I can't remember what they were called. Maybe I got it right. I don't think I did. I don't think I remembered the Endless. Because isn't one of their siblings called Eternity? Isn't that one of the siblings they actually don't know where the hell that sibling is? I don't remember. It's been a hot minute since I saw season 1 of The Sandman, so do forgive my knowledge. But it's like, yeah. What was interesting, though, is Despair was like, yeah, she liked looking in on what happened to Simon. And for her, it's like, yeah, he's been ripping those pages out for 40,000 days and nights. And it's just like that pain and just like how intoxicating it is for her. She feels off of, like feeds off of it. And she talks about her and Edwin now being friends. And it's like, oh yeah, like you'll owe me a favor, or like I'll come help you if you need. It was like, well, that's not good. I mean, to be fair, you're already running away from you're already running away from her sibling death. Now you've got some connection to her, which I'm like, what the hell does that mean? What does that storyline beat? We'll have to wait to see. But yeah, she sent Edwin back. The mirror cracking definitely gave me Evil Within vibes, especially in that regard. But I thought it was beautiful because like she was saying like, yeah, like you want to torture him, you want to lean into him, but Edwin's like, no, that's not who I am. That's not very like proper of me. But when he goes back, he apologizes to Simon. He's like, I'm sorry for both of us, because we find out what was at the root of why Simon did what he did. It's like, yeah, like your blue cap hat, you remember you wore that? He was like, I wanted to compliment you on it, but you never spoke to me. It's like, and Edwin's like, I was just nervous around you. So Simon did what he did just to kind of cover up. Once again, it wouldn't have been kosher being out, especially at that time, but I think it's just like both of them hadn't figured stuff out about themselves, and it's just Edwin was just nervous because he probably didn't recognize like, oh, I didn't know you were like me, and neither one, and they were alone and they could have found each other, but it's like I don't know how that would have fared for them at that time, but I think it's just a thing of, hey, like I want to get back at you because like you wouldn't give me the time or day. So it's that, but also it's like you're overcompensating and try to hide yourself even further. And just, yeah, things happen that way. We even learned from Edwin, I think he had ripped into Simon. He even said like, right, I was the demon you sacrificed me to, traded me to another demon that traded me to something worse. Which I guess that doll spider thing is the worst. But it's interesting because the first demon that took him was like, oh, I'm sorry, but sacrificial lamb, so you have to be like sent to hell. But it's like, he was there for 7 decades, but how long was he with each demon? Like, was it like pretty quickly that he was traded to the next demon and traded to something worse? Or was it over long periods of time? It's hard to say. Like maybe most of his 70 years was dealing with the thing he's dealing with now. It's like, yeah, this is where I was before. This is what I had to deal with for 7 decades. Who knows? But he tried to get Simon to come with him, but Simon's kind of like, no, this is what I deserve. And there's this interesting line from Edwin, who was basically like, if you blame yourself hell is basically going to follow you wherever you go, because hell is based around guilt. And now, I don't remember if they had the same correlation of how it works in the Sandman. I don't remember, but in the Lucifer TV show, that's how hell works. Basically, your guilt is what imprisons you. You can leave hell the moment you stop being guilty and you're able to kind of let it go. And I think finally Simon was able to let go. He didn't think he deserved forgiveness, but I think hearing it from Edwin, and hearing that Edwin is like at least okay and he's still gonna go, like we see the blue light, meaning I think death finally came from him, because I think his guilt he finally let go of his guilt, you know. And because we first saw it with like his hands were no longer bleeding, he was no longer having to tear out the pages endlessly. So, but just as Charles catches up to Edwin, we find out what Edwin's circumstances are. Hey, this thing, it basically, when he was like, right, this thing, that was the last part of me, the version of me you saw covered in blood, I was like, at first I was like, is this thing ripping your soul apart and this is the last piece of your soul? But it's like, no, the thing rips him to pieces over and over again and he restarts. It's kind of like was it Prometheus? I always forget. The one that's like stuck to the rock, chained to the rock, has its liver eaten like daily. Like, a bird comes and eats your liver, and then like your liver eternally recovers just to be eaten. It's kind of like that type of thing. It's like, wow, that will fuck you up. You know, it's like no matter where you run or hide, this thing will eventually find you and it rips you apart, and you just do it over and over and over and over again, which I think is sad too, because let's not forget in episode 3, Charles was kind of part of a loop for a little while. It almost makes you want, now in retrospect, you're like, considering he's kind of been trapped in a loop in his own when it came to hell, which, to be fair, that's kind of what hell does. Like, that's, even in Lucifer, you see, oh yeah, people were trapped in their like trauma loops of like their punishments and stuff like that, or their self-punishments. So I'm sure like for Edwin, it's like, right, seeing Charles in a loop and something like that probably makes him feel like even worse, probably bothered him even more seeing Charles in that regard. But luckily, Edwin isn't alone, and that gave him the courage to go. I mean, I think that's also why he wanted to bring Simon along, because this is something he had to deal with entirely on his own for 7 decades, and now it's like, no, like, he wanted someone else by his side, because it was also like, I don't want to leave anyone else here, because you don't deserve to be here. It's just sad circumstances that led to us being here, but you don't deserve to be here. Let's get out of here. And he was kind of a little broken after, just like, no matter how much I run, this thing gets me. Like, I barely escaped before, and it's just destroying his will because he felt so alone. But here's Charles, so you're not alone. And they make their way through. Finally make their way up the stairs, and Edwin ends up telling Charles, I keep doing that. I'm so sorry. Like, once again, my mouth goes faster than my brain sometimes, which is weird to say, but it does. And so I'm sure there's so many times I've been saying Charles, I've meant to say Edwin. I keep doing that so often. I do apologize. I don't know why, if it's in my head, I think that Edwin should be Charles and Charles should be Edwin. I don't know, like, if those names are more fitting like that way, or why I keep doing that. Either way, on the way up the stairs, Edwin confesses to Charles. He's like, I love you. And then he's like, I think, he's like, I love you too. I love you too, pal. Let's go. He's like, no. I don't love you, bro. I'm in love with you. Which, hey, I've been in that situation. Not in a best friend situation, but the friendship thing of, hey, we've been friends for a while. I love you. And having that person be like, yo, I got love for you, but I'm not in love with you. Like, that's a rough thing to handle. To be fair, Charles handled it in the most, like, amicable way possible, being like, right, the fact is, I know you're my best mate. Now, I love you, but I'm like, not, once again, pretty much, I'm not in love with you. We're going to have to take time to figure that all out, but you are the most important person to me in the world. There's no one else in the world I would go to hell for. And I was like, that is beautiful. And it's like, because even Charles is like, Edwin's like, I know, Charles, that you won't respond to my feelings in that regard, but I just need to stop hiding my feelings for you. I need to be a little more honest in a lot of ways. So they managed to get away from the spider and made their way back. So it's like, hey, everything worked out. Everything's kosher. Really quickly, let's circle over to the night nurse and Kimiko. I did that last episode too, or episode 2 ago. I did that. Sorry. Nico. I don't know why when I say thinking like her name, I want to say Kimiko. Cause I think in my head, for whatever reason, I immediately think of like, for whatever reason, Nico like autocorrects to Kimiko, which is like, you know, comic book wise, it's like, I don't know why, like, Kimiko from The Boys comes up first rather than, like, oh, I don't even think of Nico from The Runaways, which is close. Like, obviously it's spelled, you know, Niko versus Nco, but still. Either way, Nico's there talking to the night nurse, is kind of like, right, like, trying to find out if, depending on where you die, it has different, like, what time frame in which you die, like what the moon cycle is or whatever, like, affects that. And so she was asking where her dad is, but the night nurse is like, I handle lost and found, like, I'm part of that department, we have no bearings on any other department. And she's wondering, like, wait, people can come back, does that mean my dad could? It's like, yeah, but he'd come back as a zombie and you wouldn't want that. Which I'm like, I don't know if that's giving Nico some ideas, but it's like, yeah, do you want your dad coming back as a zombie? It's like, that's a big no-no. That could be very disastrous. I'm so curious to see if that ends up becoming something, because it felt purposeful that they included those scenes. That didn't seem like that was going nowhere. That seems like that's going to be a relevant plot, whether in the near future or further future. At the same time, this is all going down. We have Crystal confronting David, who wanted nothing to do with her until he smelled her and was like, oh, you got your powers back. Cool, let's cause some havoc and stuff. But Crystal's like, no, I'm not going to let you control me anymore. Like, I'm not afraid of you. And so she's not backing down. It's like, you're going to open a portal of hell for me. And of course, David pulled a move that you figured he would. Because for her, it's like, you like got me when I was so alone, and you kind of basically you broke me down, and like I felt so alone and powerless. But I'm not alone anymore. I have people around me who I care about, who care about me. And so because she's not so isolated and alone, that's what David did. He isolated her, made her alone, and made her an easier prey, sadly. But now she's like, right, I'm stronger. You can't stop me. And so possesses Ginny. So you're like, cool. But she ends up dragging David to her world, as I was talking about last episode. Because every time she ever met David, it's that place with the three eyes. She's assuming it's his place, but it's like, no, it's somewhere inside of you. Because he has not as much control of you as he thinks he does. But it's like, right, he wants to make you feel small and powerless, so it makes it that much easier to control you. And so by berating you and making you feel small, he's able to kind of gain some control, because he knows, like, he doesn't know the depths of how powerful she is, so... I mean, even to the point she was able to tap into her powers and freeze him. And even I love how that was like depicted when she like went into his head, and like how distorted like his head was when she was doing that, and she pulled out her memories. And he's like, right, you can't kill me, I'm a demon, like, you're not even as powerful as you are, you can't like actually kill me. She's like, cool, don't worry about it, I'm gonna bury you. Tosses him into one of the eyes, and her and her ancestors literally buried him in the depths of her. But it's like, yeah, you can't let him stay there forever, because eventually he'll come to the surface, but also his presence there is going to corrupt the tree, which is kind of a literal, physical, at least visually a visual manifestation of the essence of who she is. So it's kind of like, yeah, the longer he stays buried in this interdimensional depth of you, the more it's going to corrupt you. So he's out of the picture for now, because if you leave him out and about, the crazy bastard's going to run amok and come after you. So this keeps him out of commission for now, but that's a temporary solution. So what the permanent solution is going to be, we'll have to wait and see. Does someone really come after demons when they just like run amok on Earth? Because he said, like, right, if I could go back to hell, I would. So it's like, yeah, he's kind of stuck in. I guess, like, well, no one's coming to look for him because they don't care. Like, maybe he's so low on the food chain, and demons are like, I don't give a shit. Like, let him rot. He made the decision to go to Earth. That's his consequence. Be stuck there. Kind of similar to Mick and the whole, being stuck as a human on land thing. So either way, that situation luckily got resolved. Ginny's okay, kind of confused about everything. And then there's the real David, which I'm like, okay, that's where we're just going to leave that at. Don't know what that means going forward, but yeah. So with that all said and done, all storylines converge. I love the Nico busting in. Oh my God, the boys, they're back. They're back from hell. And Ginny's like, did you say someone's back from hell? And she's like, no, I said hello. I'm like, I love you so much, Nico. But Nico ended up being kind of the MVP too, when she ended up being the one that revealed to the night nurse, like, oh, you can't take the boys, despite their decision of, hey, Charles was like, I had to make the deal. It's the only way to go to hell. to be fair, Edwin didn't fight too much because it's like, well, it is what it is, but at least I won't be in hell regardless of it. We'll have to stick around to the lost and found until we figure out what this clerical era is and stuff like that. But, Crystal was like, no, we're not just going to like take that lying down, but they just kind of had accepted it until Nika was like, yeah, there's technically a clause that says once people you've come to collect have left to a different plane and then came back to Earth, which hell is a different dimension, technically speaking, a different plane of existence, you have to refile again, different paperwork. So now the night nurse is so upset. And she's like, I was being so respectful. I was being so cordial. I was being so forgiving to give you 30 seconds to say goodbye. I'm not unreasonable. I was trying to be cool. I did everything to help you out. And this is what you do to me? You send me back to do more paperwork? She's almost like, fuck you, and bounces. So, but luckily everything's kind of kosher on that front. Obviously our boys are back. It's like still got to figure stuff out now that the bracelet's off. Edwin doesn't have to stay, so they can go back to London. They hadn't quite figured out. The conversation that come up was like, well, what do we do about the whole Crystal thing? Like, I mean, does she tag along with us back to, well, she now has her memories, which is like, got to figure that whole thing out now. So that's been dealt with. But even David was like, oh, what about, like, are you going to be happy when you see those memories? So it's like, what's going to happen on that front? What are those memories going to show her? That's kind of where the episode ends for us. But we also get that scene at the end where, well, for one, we have Esther working on her plans. We did see Monty again, obviously still crow form, so there's no talking Monty in that capacity. But I guess because he's back to being in his bird form, he's even more of a familiar. So that was him keeping an eye on them like Esther probably wants him to. Like, he had probably a lot more freedom as a human, so maybe now that he's back to being a bird, he has a lot more, like, restraints on him. Or maybe after everything, she put more restraints on him of, like, I have more control over you, so you still have to do what I say type of thing. But we also have the night nurse visiting her superior. It has a number 2 on the door. I'm like, who the hell is your superior? But we didn't get to see. So maybe that's something that's teased up for next episode of finding out who that person is. So who's the head of, like, her department. Overall, some very, very interesting developments all across the board. I'm very, very excited to ultimately see where the season finale takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.